this new recording with Ironwood, Mozart's Stolen Beauties, I was faced with a bit of a logistical challenge. For the majority of the disc, the Mozart Horn Quintet, the Michael Haydn Romance, the Punto Duets and the variations, the anonymous variations on La Cité d'après mille manos, all require the natural horn, or the hand horn, that is to say the classical instrument that predates the valve horn and is played using what we call hand technique, which involves me manipulating my right hand in the bell of the instrument to fill in the gaps that naturally occur in the harmonic series. However, one of the pieces, the Livius arrangement of Mozart's Kegelstatt Trio, requires a different sort of horn. The valve was invented 200 years ago in the early 19th century, and it took a while for this technology to take off in some places, most notably France and the UK, where there was a strong resistance to the new instrument. Livius was an amateur horn player and musician living in England during the 19th century, and is thought to have studied with the superstar horn player of the age, Giovanni Puzzi. Today we are lucky to have excellent evidence as to the type of instrument Livius would have played, as an instrument bearing both his name and his teacher's is in the collection of the Horn Museum in London. Needing two horns, a hand horn for the bulk of the disc and an early valve horn for the Livius arrangement, poses a bit of a problem when I live in the UK and the recording and Ironwood are in Australia. Happily though, the 19th century and the evidence of Livius's own instrument gives us a very creative solution. There was a type of horn which is known as a Sauterelle horn. Sauterelle is the French term for grasshopper, and I can only assume that this term is used because it illustrates how you have an instrument with a valve block that can hop on and hop off again. Livius's instrument was made by the French maker Lucien Sautterell, and originally it would have looked very similar to this instrument, a cor solo also by Lucien Sautterell. It would have had a fixed lead pipe, so you wouldn't have the crooks at the beginning of the instrument, but you would have changed the pitch and the overall key of the instrument by changing the internal crook here on the tuning slide. But the instrument belonging to Livius also has a removable block consisting of two valves. We know from the marking of 1814 on the Horniman instrument that this instrument predates the valve, just about. So the two valve block which we find on the instrument must have been a later addition. You have in effect two instruments for the price of one. Remove the valves and you have a natural horn, or add them and you have an early valve horn. Many fine natural horns were converted during the 19th and early 20th century. It was partially a savvy, frugal move. If you have an excellent hand horn, you could have it altered and then you would have a valve horn without having to buy a completely new instrument. However, if you wanted to have the option to use either design of instrument, or maybe you weren't convinced that this new fad for valves was anything but a passing phase, then you'd be covered. This hints at the fact that during the 19th century, many horn players who had valve horns had not totally abandoned the early natural horn hand technique. This mixed technique, using both the early hand technique and the new fashioned valves, it suddenly opened up a new range of colours and effects that the horn players could experiment with. One of the leading exponents of this mixed technique was Joseph Miffred. Miffred was a horn player in France and almost exactly contemporary to Livius. Miffred thought long and hard about the aesthetics of the new instrument and came up with a number of rules as to how you should approach playing the new valve instrument, incorporating the best of aspects of natural horn hand technique and the best that the valves had to offer. And in the course of this piece I experimented with using a mixture of the hand technique and valves in the manner